Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Moi, je m'appelle Carole, je suis irlandaise.
Hello, my name is Reike.
And my name is Caroline, and we are representing Denmark today.
Our school takes part in many different projects. One of them is the Comenius project, which allows students from all over Europe to establish contact with each other.
I would like to start by asking you a question. How do we, Poles, differ from all the other nations? Any idea, please? Now I would like you all to stand up. Now look at each other and try to answer my question. How do we differ? In a matter of fact, we don't differ as human beings. We're all the same, no matter where we come from. Thank you very much. You can all sit down.
Hello. It's an honor to be here representing Sweden and Karlfeldtsgymnasiet. Sweden is internationally known for many years of peace and democracy. It's important for us to have an untouched nature and keep nature as clean as possible, as well as working for human rights and equality for all.
In the Netherlands, freedom of speech is a very important value. We are very happy to be here today, and hopefully it will be a wonderful event. Thank you very much.
Land of rivers, lakes and ponds, friendly people by the coast, please come and visit us, our hometown squatters. Lithuania, Lithuania, now you know from where we are, from Lithuania.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, and thank you very much indeed, first of all, for this invitation to Euroscola. May I take this opportunity to welcome you all as a member of the European Parliament. Welcome. We had a very exciting part session this week here in Strasbourg. There were a number of topics on our agenda, for instance, Ukraine, personal data and air transport, and also LuxLeaks.
Hello. My name is Ioana Gheorgheș. I'm from Romania, Transylvania, Cluj-Napoca, and I have the next question for you. What measures do the European Union plan in order to integrate the disadvantaged minorities of people who live in different countries? For instance, in Romania doesn't have the necessary support to solve all the problems of Romani people, as our image is badly affected by their behavior. Thank you.
Have we done anything? Yes, we have. The European Parliament has taken measures. For instance, in the previous mandate, we had a visit to Romania, and we took a look at projects that are targeted for the Roma population. Now, you might say, well, these projects are not enough, a lot remains to be done, and that's true. There's a lot of poverty out there, really serious poverty. But at the same time, there are projects, they are being supported and funded by the EU, so that would be my answer to you. Yes, the European Union is doing something. I personally think that enough money is made available. Again, there is money available. The problem is that it's not being absorbed properly, used properly. And again, as for the programs and the decisions regarding those programs, those decisions have to be taken by the member states and their governments. Thank you.
My name is George Xenis from Greece. I have the following question to ask you. What measures will the EU take in order to solve the immigration problem of people who come from third countries and do not have the necessary documents to travel in the EU, but therefore they're going to go to European countries by passing countries like Greece or Italy? Will the EU give them the necessary documents to travel? Will these countries keep them? Will the EU send them back to the countries they come from? What will happen?
Ich fand es dann aber schon interessant, dass ein Land wie Italien
Italy complained about the number of refugees coming in, but if you look at the figures, in actual fact, you'll find that in 2013, for example, a small country such as Austria took in more asylum seekers than a large country such as Italy. So, as you can tell from that, the discussion is far from straightforward. It's all a question of people, you know, people's fears, people in Europe are starting to be fearful of refugees coming in. That's another dilemma. What can governments do? What can they decide? What kind of programs do we have in order to accommodate these refugees as best we can? So we need to have a discussion with people, with our citizens. We need to do some awareness raising. We need to convince people, because those who are coming to the EU need our help. We need to get that message across. We need to welcome them. We want to welcome them, integrate them. I think to a great extent it's a political problem. A lot of people are afraid, and of course there are radical forces at play. You know, we have them here in this house as well. They sit on the right side of the parliament, and they are making political mileage out of this. They're using this to do scaremongering and to incite negative feelings towards refugees and asylum seekers. So again, we need to talk to our citizens. We need to make sure that our immigration policy is something that they can take ownership of too.
Good morning, my name is Alicia. I'm from Portugal, and my question is, what role should be played by the European Union to help solving Ukraine-Russia situation?
Now, you've got talks in Minsk. You might have read about it in the press. Minsk talks. You've got a Franco-German initiative. François Hollande, the President of France, and Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, have launched an initiative to try to move things forward. Their purpose is to try to de-escalate the conflict, to achieve a ceasefire. And after that, political solutions may be sought. But first of all, you have to put down arms, lay down arms, in order for diplomacy to then start its process, to kickstart the diplomatic process. As for the European Parliament, we've adopted some resolutions. We've called for an end to the war, of course. We've also adopted a recommendation to the Russian government, the separatists, etc. And in particular, with regard to Russia, we have actually adopted some financial sanctions, economic sanctions against Russia. Now, they're actually quite forceful. It's a strong tool that we can use vis-à-vis Russia. And if Russia wants us to withdraw these financial sanctions, well, very well. In that case, the Russian government has to stop influencing or stop supporting the separatist forces. That's the trade-off. Again, we've got these talks in Minsk. We very much hope that things will move forward. But at the same time, I have to say I'm realistic. I'm not terribly optimistic as things stand right now. I think all of this will take quite some time to put an end to this conflict and to relieve the tension. It will take some time. A lot of people have been affected. A lot of people have been killed. It's not easy to change things overnight. Nevertheless, I hope it will work in the end. And in the long term, it is, I believe, in our interest to have good relations with Russia. I think it's in their interest too. The European Union and Russia could actually have a really important partnership which we could build up together. The EU has technology. We have a strong economy. Russia needs technology. Russia has a lot of raw materials, of course. Raw materials is something that the EU needs. So it goes to show that if you could have a move towards partnership, it would be better for everyone. And many people in this parliament, I myself included, don't quite understand why President Putin and the Kremlin have gone for this conflict. We don't understand it. We hope that they will backtrack.
Good morning, everyone. My name is George Penny, and I'm from England. How do you feel that the European Parliament and the European Union as a whole should respond to the recent rise in Eurosceptic parties and anti-EU sentiments within member states?
What I think is problematic is if we have colleagues here, and we have some from your country, from the United Kingdom, but also from other countries, who use any opportunity to attack in a very polemic way the European Union. Because what is the European Union? The European Union is no alien coming out of the outer space, octroying us laws. The European Union are we. And anything what is decided by the European Union is a competence which was given by the member states to the European Union. And anything we cannot decide where we don't have a competence is the decision of the member states who didn't give us the competence to decide. And so sometimes it's really crazy that head of states come to Brussels and attack the European Union, that Eurosceptic parties attack the European Union. And it is interesting they attack the European Union for doing something not, but if you look at it, we don't have the competence, or they attack us for doing something, and if you look at it, we have the competence given from the member states. And I think you cannot solve problems in such a way. So, for instance, in my home country, in Germany, if we have a law being done in the German parliament in Berlin and people are not satisfied, they don't stand up and say, let's get rid of the Federal Republic of Germany, and separate the country off. We don't have that discussion. In other countries that's different. But then the people say, let's change with votes the majority in the German Bundestag to get rid of that law. And from my point of view, that is the answer for the European Union as well. If you are not satisfied with the legislation which is done here in the European Parliament, we should vote other members to this House. And from that point of view, I am completely disappointed that so many citizens utter their criticism against the European Union, but they are not able to go voting for the European Parliament. And that is the most stupid thing you can do, because this is the opportunity to have a direct influence of the European legislation. To sum up, I'm completely convinced that in a world with 7 billion people and soon 10 billion people, small countries like Germany with more than 80 million inhabitants cannot have an influence. So the only influence we can have as countries in Europe, with Luxembourg with 700,000 inhabitants, with Great Britain with more than 60 or 70 million inhabitants, or Germany with 80 million, is if we unify our interests. And to do that in a democratic framework like the European Union is one of the greatest advantages in European history, because we had a history of centuries of wars between the countries. Now we have almost 1 century a history of cooperation, and we are far better off with this cooperation than we had been with the confrontative approaches hundreds of years before. And therefore I'm absolutely convinced of the European Union, and we should start to convince the citizens back for that project.
Hello, I'm Efthymia and I come from Greece. And I want to ask, a part of European countries faces the major problem of youth unemployment. For instance, Greece has an extremely increased percentage of young unemployed people. How can Europe help minimize this problem?
And your question is how to overcome the high youth unemployment. I think that is the greatest challenge, because there is no miracle to get jobs and well-paid jobs, and it is very difficult for states to create these jobs, because we had this discussion and experience in former times with state-run or socialist economies. They were not better off. They were not more wealthy than market economies. But if you look at it, I'm convinced that the state is not able to create jobs. It must be the private economy. And now the question is, do you think that a country like Greece is at the moment in an attractive shape to attract businesses and enterprises from all over the world to invest in the country? And that is the answer. I think you have to change the framework in the countries like that, that enterprises will come there, that Greek people who have fled the country, who have taken the money out of the country, bring that money back to the country, open businesses there, create new ideas, create new enterprises, and employ people. So I think we should focus on that question, because that is the secret of economic success. And because I'm now forced to leave you, I would love to discuss a little bit longer, but I'm not able to do that. I would like to conclude. I think we Europeans, we have so many potentials. We have universities and infrastructure. And I think to overcome our stagnation or recession, we discussed on the youth unemployment in some parts of the European Union, I think we should focus on what we could give as a European Union to the world. I think the European Union has the potential to develop climate protection tools, technologies, environmental protection tools technology, which can solve a lot of problems in a globe which a growing population. I think we should go forward with this policy and develop the technologies which can help to fight poverty and which can help to protect our environment.
Our first proposal is to set up EU-wide competitions where firms who are building a sustainable development are able to bid for subsidies available. Our second is to provide financial incentives through taxes and subsidies to discourage the importing of food which can already be readily produced in the EU. This will reduce food miles and thus CO2 emissions whilst also supporting EU businesses. Our final proposal is to provide long-term European central bank loans to poorer countries within the EU, such as Croatia. These countries have the ability to use renewable energy, but do not have the financial resources to purchase them. Thank you for listening.
I would ask the first speaker whether or not it is appropriate to set up essentially an auction for subsidies for whatever it is they use them for. Thank you.
This wouldn't be an auction, as the giving out of subsidies would be purely based on merit of the companies or businesses involved. Therefore, instead of being an auction, it would be providing the subsidy to the firm that can provide the best outcome for the environment. Thank you.
We think that the EU should invest more money in creating microloans. Those loans should be given to, especially women, in third world countries. With those loans, they are able to set up their own business and help them become self-sufficient. Furthermore, education is very important. Money should be invested in education in developing countries, so that all boys and girls can go to primary schools for free. In order to achieve that, the cultural beliefs need to change, because their mindset at this point is that the children must work on the land. They do not see that investing in long-term solutions is better. This needs to change. Moreover, we want to install solar panels in the third world countries in order to provide them with energy. This will create jobs for people in the EU and will cause a decrease of the unemployment rate in the EU. At last, we think that the import rates in the EU should be lowered for the fair trade products of developing countries. In that way, we do not have to spend money on them, but instead make our market more accessible. To summate, we think we must invest in long-term solutions and not only in providing people with measurements that will solely be of an effect at short term. We hope you will all vote in favor of this report. Thank you very much.
How do you propose to continue funding these schools? Because you can establish a school and hire teachers, but those teachers are going to continue needing like salaries, and if the families can't afford to pay for schooling, then it is effectively a really, really long-term thing that you're proposing to do, to pay for schooling for generations of people. And I was just wondering where you get the money from. I agree with what you're saying, but yeah.
But we are giving development aid like for ages now, for a very long time, and we can continue doing that because we can, for a generation, give those teachers, for example, a salary of the development aid that is going on right now and will be going on. But eventually, after a generation or so have passed these schools, they will have a job, so they will have money to put their own children into school. But yes, it is a long-term thing. We have what is going on.
The European Union stands as one of the greatest achievements of the human race. It has brought greater unity than we have seen before in Europe, providing peace, security, and international political importance. However, as we enter the 21st century, new challenges are beginning to appear. In order to face the difficulties of the future and ensure the continuation of this impressive institution, this working group has identified the following key policy areas. We realise that one of the most essential elements underpinning a successful and continuing Europe is to ensure greater cohesion between individual member states, working together on pan-European initiatives in order to ensure better education, increases in ecological successes, more effective social law, and also increasing security to combat terrorism, drug and human trafficking.
You have generally spoken around what is called développement durable, and however, a crucial subject nowadays is the European ideals, such as cooperation, dignity, diversity, which are receiving an attack. So how can we help preserve these ideals?
Well, those ideals are clearly essential. They're at the cornerstone of the European Union, and we believe they should remain as such. We believe that these sorts of ideals are best preserved through further cohesion by member states working together and making common statements on given policies. We'd also hope to some extent, increase transparency in European institutions, making sure that it's much easier for citizens to view broadcasts of the Parliament, for example, to really give them a sense that they were part of a united Europe. And through this, we believe that that would protect these ideals better than any policy could, simply allowing people to become involved and allowing individual member states, residents, to understand and see Europe, we believe, is the best argument we could provide as to why it's such a great institution. And if the people want it, then we believe it will endure.
We propose creating a mobile application for making EU developments more accessible in a non-biased manner. This will be run by a body of official elected correspondents who come from an independent background. Our second proposal is an investment to raise awareness of EU progress for other people. And how we will do this? Well, we're going to invest in IT skills and basically teaching older people how to perhaps use computers, and then it makes things easier. Also of note is that we want to invest in general communications infrastructure, and this is more of a long-term investment with the hope of helping businesses and individuals along the way. We would also like to design and implement a mandatory class in the schools of member states to teach them the basics of politics and how different systems work. Another surprising idea that we came up with is that we would like to see more initiatives such as Euroscola, as we believe that this will gauge further interest in the youth in both European politics and that which takes place in their respective member states. Finally, in a general sense, we also hope somehow to bring the European Parliament closer to the citizen, the specifics of which have not yet been decided, but in the long term, again, it is hoped that it will make the flow of information more easier to access for both people young and old. I'll take any questions. Thank you.
You talked about the mandatory classes for politics, about the politics in member states as well as in the EU, I assume. I wanted to ask what kind of role the EU would play in that. Would that be just encouraging member states to set up those classes? Would it be organising the classes and then bringing them to the member states? How much should we be telling individual member states interfering, if that's how you want to put it, in their education systems? Thank you.
Okay. You want to gauge young people's interests. Over the last 30 years, it's been shown that the amount of people voting in European Parliament elections for MEPs has dropped by something like 60–70%. So our proposal isn't really to interfere with national education systems as such, but rather to tailor some sort of program to their individual needs, providing the basic platform to understanding why voting is important and why ignoring these kind of topics isn't the right attitude to have.
Okay, so we proposed that volunteering and work experience are vitally important for the transition of young people into the world of work, and that the EU should recognise their value and support them because of that. Many of my colleagues explained that in their home countries, in particular Lithuania and Greece, employers do not value volunteer experience on the same level as previous experience in the workplace. And this means that young people are unable to compete with older people who may have more experience in the workplace. And so the group decided that the EU should work with employers to change attitudes so that employers can consider voluntary experience on the same level as previous experience in the workplace. And it was also suggested that member states' governments could and should offer incentives to businesses in order to increase provision for internships and apprenticeships. And the final issue on which the Chamber agreed was the need for positive discrimination, so providing incentives for companies to employ younger people, such as tax breaks or actual financial incentives. So this would be encouraged by the EU as if we proposed it.
How are you going to do this that the voluntary work will look better for the employers? Because you just said that you want to change the attitudes of the employer, but how? Like, in what way?
We didn't actually discuss how we would do this, but my suggestion would be to change attitudes through education, through courses for employers, to really make people think, and also encouraging, when you do voluntary work, the people you're working for, it's not always official, it's not always mandated that they need to give you a report on your progress at the end. If it was strongly encouraged or made law that you had to give exact details, had to be able to give a sheet that said maybe your progress that you made through that work experience to your next employer, if you had that sheet to give to your next employer, that would improve how the employer saw your work experience, because they would have actual evidence from the people you worked voluntarily for that you were a good worker and that you had done so many things.